Yeah.
Hi everyone. We're the Proctors, and it is October, and it is a time for devotion. So we are live. So please like, share this. Facebook, YouTube. We want people to be engaged. We have an awesome topic tonight talking about time because that's something we all could use a little bit more of. So definitely you want to tune in tonight.
hmm
I'm Kelly,
I'm Jason.
and we are so happy to be here tonight. And yeah, this is a time of sharing, gathering with the word. So just hi to all Lifeline partners and friends. Like we said, like it, share this. Good evening, Miss Shauna. Good evening, Shanae. And we will, even if you have questions or something at the end, Jason may look and see them, and we'll do that. But definitely tune in. Everyone focuses on time, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you got kids, whether you got a job, whether you're a child. Time is important. And tonight we're going to explore God's relationship to time. And then we're going to talk about how we see time, and then understanding how we maybe better can see time and view time as a concept and as a dimension. And hopefully we won't get too scientific and technical. I will stop Mr. Proctor if he does. But we are happy to be here. We just celebrated our fourth wedding anniversary, so we're so excited.
Yes.
It's not 25 like our pastors, so that's
Yeah.
really exciting for them. But we're on our way, going
Ye-
to.
yes.
So let's just get right in. Again, we're going to talk about God's relationship to time. And, as human beings, we are creatures of time. We, measure everything in our lives about time, whether it is, there's 24 hours in a day. So you got 24 hours in a day to do everything that you got to do. There's 7 days in a week. You figure out how you're going to map out your week, and I'm very much into being time oriented. I'm very much into having a schedule, having a calendar, making sure that I'm keeping track of my time, how I spend my time. I'm very conscious of, not using my time wisely or losing time, as I like to say, where, 3 or 4 hours have gone by in the day and you don't have anything to show that you did for it. But we'll talk about those things because that's not necessarily the best way to be. My husband is kind of I don't know, I wouldn't say the opposite, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I would
Yes.
say 50% of our arguments since we've been married have been
Mhm.
centered around time or timeliness of, we're supposed to be ready at this time. We're supposed to, because
Mhm.
I'm very stickler for time. And Jason wants to be on time. He's just not always successful.
In
We
my
will say.
defense, in my defense, right, I'm usually working really, really long hours, and there's usually multiple things that I'm juggling. I don't always do a good time,
Manage.
a good job of managing all the things that
Organize.
I'm juggling. Get your life. I don't always do a good job of juggling the things, but yes, I do not actually asking the wrong people. I actually don't like being late, but yes, being mindful of time, being aware of it is something that we're going to talk about. I had an opportunity to have Kelly for the first time watch Inception, one of my favorite movies. I love Christopher Nolan. That's a Christopher Nolan film that he directed, and we'll get into that a little bit and talking about the message as it relates to God's time and chronological time, the time that we understand.
So let's first kind of go into the biblical, Bible insight on what God's relationship with time is, because
Mhm.
it's different than how we live our day to day lives.
Yes.
So Psalms 90, verse 4, out of the King James Version, 94, says, "For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday, when it is past, and as a watch in the night." So it's talking about God. Basically, 1,000 years is as one day unto the Lord. In the NLT, it says, "For you, 1,000 years are as a passing day, as brief as a few night hours." So definitely we can see how the Bible, when it talks about how, we're merely a vapor, because 1,000 years is a long time. We ain't living 1,000 years, but to the Lord, to God, 1,000 years is one day. That's how, quick it's moving. What's another scripture that we had related to God's relationship with time?
2 Peter chapter 3, verses 8 through 9 in the Amplified Classic. Nevertheless, do not let this one fact escape you, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. The Lord does not delay and is not tardy or slow about what he promises, according to some people's conception of slowness, but he is long suffering, so extraordinarily patient, is long suffering towards you, not desiring that any should perish, but that all should turn to repentance.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, about how and why the Lord is long suffering to us. That's a gift from him, that he is long suffering to us in that respect. And a lot of times when people look at the things that are going on in the world, they say, well, why isn't God doing this? Or why isn't God addressed this? And you have to understand, God has already set things in motion. He is already moving. A lot of things, in terms of Jesus coming back and all of that, he's giving time for people to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. And God knows the most opportune time to when that all needs to occur. So we just have to rest and trust that God knows best, and stop complaining, really. The last scripture we had was Isaiah 57:15 out of the Amplified Classic. And it says, "For thus says the high and lofty one, he who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, but with him also who is of a thoroughly penitent and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the thoroughly penitent." So it's what we focus on here is he who inhabits eternity. God inhabits eternity. So when we talk about God and his relationship with time, the main point we want to make is God is not constrained by time. He is not constrained by time. Why? Because time is a dimension that God created. The creator can't be restrained by its thing that it's created. We could go in deep and like, well, what about the people who, make computers and the computers take over, the robots take over? God is creator over everything. And he is not held hostage in that sense to the things that he has created. So time was something that God created. And we see that in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. You want to read that?
King James,
Yes.
The King James Version, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
So we see there, God was creating time. He separated light from dark, and one became day and one became night. So if God created that, he's not going to be held constrained or in a box by what he has created. And we need to understand that, that God is not constrained by time, by what he has created. And the first point, which I think I missed too, is that, which I'll get to now, point number one is we understand things very linearly. And there's two words in Greek for the word time. And one is chronos, which is how we kind of see time, which I mentioned at the beginning, 24 hours in a day, everything chronological, linearly, and there's kairos time, which is opportune time, that we'll get into a little bit later. But we understand the world and things very linearly. Everything that we do, you don't go to 12th grade until you've gone through 1st through 11th grade. You skip, you don't go to dinner and, first there's breakfast, there's lunch. There's like an order and, to everything that we go through. We have clocks, we have calendars. And we're limited in our relationship with time. You know, no matter how many time travel movies you want to watch, we can't go back into time. You know, I can't go back into 1979 when I was born, you know, and Jason can't go back to 1980 when he was born. You know, we're constrained. We can't experience more than one thing, one instance at a time. You know, I'm only one, you know, physical body. I can't be in multiple places at different times experiencing different things and whatnot. But we have to understand that God doesn't have those limitations. And a lot of times we see, you know, even though we're made in the image and likeness of God, we're limited in our abilities and whatnot that we can do in this earthly realm. And God is not doesn't have those limitations. He is Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. He's able to experience every moment of time at once. That's how he can look at us. He can look at us and see our future. He can see the end. He can see us through, you know, you may be going through a bad time and just feel so awful, and God can look at you and see the end of the thing. You know, do you want to talk about the movie now, or do you want to kind of talk about the differences and how us and God in terms of time?
Well, so a lot of it has to do with perspective. So there are actually two movies that kind of come to mind. So the one that Kelly saw this past weekend with me was Inception by Christopher Nolan. There's another movie that we saw when we first started dating from Christopher Nolan called Interstellar, and both of those deal with time in an interesting way. So in Inception, it's about I don't want to totally spoil the movie for people, but the high level. It's with Leonardo DiCaprio, really good cast, and the idea is that they are using a device that puts people to sleep. So in the dream state, what they're able to do is lull people in and allow them to feel things in the dream with their subconscious mind. So the idea of Inception is there's information or data that they're trying to get from someone, and the whole idea is they have people go to sleep, and while they're asleep, they're able to the mind, subconscious mind, like feels a construct like a safe or like a bank with whatever secrets that they might have. And the idea of time is like, so there's different levels, right? So what they do is they start playing with time and having a dream with inside of a dream, inside of a dream, so that they're able to kind of trick the person into thinking that the environment has changed. But each level, time gets compounded, right? So the first level, let's say, is like a few hours. The second level down, or the next dream within the dream, now it's several months, and the next level underneath that, the next dream that they might put someone under is several years. So this idea of perspective of like how time, if you were to look at it from a linear perspective, and the way we understand it, like, tomorrow will be, Wednesday, and hours progress to hours, progress to days, progress to weeks. But for God, like that, our understanding of time is really a man-made construct, right? That was something we created so that we would have a better understanding of how things progress. But in and of itself, I mean, that's just something we made to make life easier for us. I mean, something to make sense of the world spinning, the days changing, the seasons, that's, just.
Or even like daylight savings time.
Exactly.
That's something that's created it was for farmers, I think, originally, so that they would have, the right hours to do their work.
For the harvest.
Yeah. And we know that, we typically don't want to be out when it's dark doing certain things, and things are heavily skewed towards the daytime, like going to work and, going to school. So, yeah.
But, think about, again, from God, it's perspective, right? So I've used, and a teaching that we did before, this idea of if you say, think of God being in a tall building, right? And you're on the ground level. So if God is, say on the 40th floor, 100th floor of a building, right? He's able, his vantage point, his perspective is a lot further than yours. And so he can see things coming from further away. And a lot of times, that's what God is trying to get us to understand, is that, when he talks about my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways, his vantage point and his perspective is a lot further. His vantage point and perspective is a lot all encompassing and more, because he's not constrained, as we're saying, by these constructions that he's created, by these things that we have created to better understand life. And so it's leaning into his understanding. It's turning our will, turning our understanding to his, to help us to understand that, we're not as bogged down or as constrained as it may seem. And the movie kind of played, Inception, the movie Interstellar is another one. That's more, about space travel, but they also do talk about time. Towards the end, they end up in this construct called a tesseract, and where you're able to see dimensions as it exists, almost linearly. Like if we were to see a day, if a day was like, say, a moment that you could just point to, right? In a way, I found that kind of interesting, because in a way that's all might be a way, God actually views it. You know what I mean? If you don't have the constraints of having to progress through life, progress through time linearly, if you could at any moment just pick a point in time and hop into that moment, or experience that, or experience them all at the same time, I thought it was a visually interesting way to kind of describe and depict, if you're not constrained by time as we understand it, that might be how it looks.
Yeah, it's like all those superhero movies, how they're going into the multiverse and multi dimensions. Jason gets me into all of these things now, and yeah, it's like, like if you're not constrained, like you said, by different days or weeks or whatever, you can look at it all as a whole and kind of hop in, to different eras, times, generations. And God, who inhabits eternity, he inhabits all of these times and areas. Another example I saw likened it to like an animator, of a creator of a film. While the film is running, the characters are limited. They're only experiencing one cell at a time, like how they make animation. It starts with a comic book. It starts with, the different individual cells. In this cell, they're saying this. In this cell, they're doing this. And the animator lives in a place where all the cells exist at once, because they know exactly what everything is going to happen or whatever. They can view them all at will. They can jump around and see, okay, well, this character is going to die on this cell. This is going to happen in this cell. And they can see how it all impacts the whole. So God, he doesn't just see us where we are now. He sees into our future. He knew our future even before he created us. He even in the beginning, he was, he didn't, there was no, we can't trace a beginning and ending to him. It starts in the Bible. In the beginning was, in John 1, in the beginning was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And, we have to kind of expand our limited understanding and realize that God has this unrestrained relationship with time. And I think if we tap into that, then it will show us why we need him, and then also show us why, how we can pray more out of the box concerning what he can do. Because a lot of times we're praying God in a very limited manner, because we're thinking about it in terms of our timetables and days. And we think, okay, well, it takes 4 years for this to occur or for this to happen. So, I don't know if God can do that quickly. And really, God can snap his fingers and that can take place and whatnot. So let's see, what's the next? And even like I was reading, some theologians have said, the ability of God even to create the world in 6 days, it was because the days did not confine him. He was able to do all of these things that he did because he was not confined by those things. So it's really interesting, like we said, to kind of go into that and to understand, how God can see everything that will happen, in history, and exactly know the most effective time in history, that people will come closer to him, that the most people will receive him. That's what we're waiting on. We're waiting on the return of Jesus. And even Jeremiah 29:11, which we always say, for I know the plans that are in your heart, or the plans that I have for you, says the Lord, to prosper you, give you a hope and a future expected in.
Mhm.
It's based on the fact that God has perfect knowledge of all history, present, and future. So when we ignore or fail to trust in God's plan, it's really, ridiculous, because he has the perfect GPS. He has it perfectly mapped out to avoid every, single thing that we don't need to go through. Doesn't mean that we're avoiding distresses or troubles, because sometimes we have to go through those things. But he knows the most opportune route, and we can only pick an inferior one at that point. So when we trust our own plans more than God's, it's us choosing really an inferior route for our lives. And that's why we have to seek the Lord concerning his plans for us. What is, let's see, a few other things about God. God has no beginning or ending, which we mentioned. We're finite. God is not finite. He's infinite. And like Jason said, when we understand those things, we can see how short-sighted our perspective is. And a lot of times the things that we're complaining about as it relates to, things not happening according to our timetables, or things that are happening in the world or not happening, it's really based on our limited perspective. We're saying this should have happened by now. Why is this taking so long? Or why is this hasn't happened yet? We can't allow frustrations, especially in the times that we're in with the pandemic and whatnot. We can't allow those types of frustrations to make us complain about God, because like Jason said, he's sitting at the top of the building. He can see everything that's coming up ahead. And we're saying, well, why didn't this happen? Whatever. And you don't know that, 2 steps behind you, somebody was going to run a car into you or something. We always pray and say, thank you, Lord, for protecting us from seen and unseen dangers. We don't know all of this stuff. So we have to trust the Lord, because he keeps a long range view beyond our ability to comprehend.
And a lot of this has to do with trust, right?
Yeah.
So in trusting in God, and understanding that, even though God is personified and described in the Bible like a father or like a person, that's just really so that as human beings, we can wrap our brains around what God really is and how God is perceived. But in reality, God is not human.
Mm-hmm.
We ascribe human characteristics to God, again, just so it makes it easier for us to grasp. But, make no mistake, God, when we talk about, or when the Bible talks about the wrath of God, the vengeance of God, or when God is angry and upset, that's not human anger. That's not an emotion. There is no,
like he's not going to get out of control.
Yeah,
run with it, or
yeah, there's nothing, there's not, it's not like from a human standpoint where there's some jealousy involved, or there's some negative connotation or reasoning behind it. It's all based on God wanting to keep us in line with the plan that he has for our lives. And so a lot of times, one, that plan is not clear to us, or it's not made available to us readily, and there's reasons for that. And I truly believe that if you earnestly pray to God for God to reveal that to you, he will.
Yeah.
But, just like, think about, again, the way we often talk about God being a father, right? Think, we're not parents yet, but think about, if some of you are parents who have children, right? There are a lot of things that you don't always disclose to your children because it might harm them, and you're just trying to protect them. And that's all God is really trying to do with us a lot of times. Sometimes he can't give you the full scope of what's going on because it might be harmful to you.
Yeah.
And again, it's that trusting and understanding that his perspective, his vantage point from where he sits, he knows, hey, this is what it is that I need to do, what it is I need to say, what it is that I need to convey to the person, what they're exposed to. If you feel as though sometimes that, the analogy they use with diamonds, right? A diamond is made by pressure, right? If you take a piece of coal over years and years and years of being pressed down, inside the earth or whatever, you can make a gemstone. I mean, not all coal turns into diamonds, right? I mean, there are certain conditions that have to be met. But my point is that it's not something that happens in an instant.
Yeah.
There is a process that occurs, and it's that process that produces that gem. Without that process, you don't have this finely, tuned, this finely polished, gem at the end. That's very valuable, mind you. So think about that. That's a good analogy to think about. Even we as people, you might start off as coal. You might start off in a situation that you think is worthless, but over time, it's
refining us.
It's refinement. Every bit of pressure, every situation that you're placed in, every obstacle ultimately has led you to the place that you are right now.
And you'll come out as pure gold.
And it's sometimes hard for us as human beings to understand and be okay with, well, even the negative stuff you mean? Are you trying to tell me that the bad stuff that like I could have done without is ultimately like led me to like where I am today? Yes, it is. And and you've seen this even in pop culture and movies. You got people who try to go back in time and change the one little negative thing,
and then it's like 10 more things,
and then you see all the other things now that are, so you may have now change the one little bad thing that you think is just so horrible, but look at the repercussions you didn't consider. What was that movie or that TV series you used to watch with the time travel where they would get into?
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Timeless.
Timeless.
Yeah, that was a really good series. It's not on anymore, but but you saw even in that series
they had to be very careful not to change too much because one little deviation here could change the course of a whole nother thing and prevent something else from happening.
And oftentimes that's all God is really trying to get us to understand. I do truly believe pop culture, reality mirrors the spiritual. I think a lot of times
learn from it.
These creative endeavors are man's attempt at trying to just understand and explain something that is deeper within all of us. And I feel like sometimes it's harder for us to grasp that. So these are attempts at trying to bridge the gap and say, okay, well, maybe you can't understand scripture. Maybe you can't understand something as abstract as that, but you can understand a story about, love. You can understand a story about the hero winning out. And all these stories have parallels. All these stories are similar for a reason. The stories in the Bible, at the core of it, are all similar to like the stories that we see in movies, all over. And and there's a reason why it resonates within us, right? One of the things that, whenever I get Kelli to watch any of the superhero stuff that I like to watch, the key that I always point out is, it's not about focusing in on the super fantastical, right? These new incarnations of, Marvel and DC movies, Spider-Man, the X-Men. The reason why those things to me are so great is because they focus in on the human aspects of these characters. It's the fact
regular, issues and whatnot.
And it's that theme. And so it's that propels it and makes it so great to me. It's like it's focusing in on something that really like pulls at your heartstrings. And I feel like in a way, that's God, what God is trying to do with us all the time. He's trying to get you sometimes to focus on, well, maybe you can't understand the grandiose, maybe you can't understand the end. So I'll give you something small to wrap your brain around right now and to hear it now, and that leads you to the expected end. That leads you to this goal that he's trying to, to get us all to. And it's something that, it says in the Bible, be ye transformed through the constant renewing. It's this process that's always ongoing. So even in our marriage, right? We celebrated 4 years, but it's a decision that we make every day. It's not like, 4 years ago when we were on the altar and said, I do, that now all of a sudden it stops, right? every day it's recommitting.
You
It's
have to choose to love, choose to respect, choose to honor,
mhm.
choose to be gracious. Yeah. All right, so we're running out of time.
Yes.
Let's just give them a little bit in terms of, so we kind of gave you God's relationship with time, how we kind of think of time typically. The Bible does tell us over and over again to not waste our time, and to make the best use of our time. And Jesus is our best example. He lived on the earth as a man, and he didn't start his public ministry until he was 30 years old. And in 3 years' time, he was able to completely accomplish all of the work that God had given him to do. So it shows that you can make the most out of even something that, doesn't seem like a lot. And some of the scriptures that you can read about that are Ephesians 5:11 through 16. I'll read that one in the Message. It says, "Don't waste your time on useless work, mere busy work, the barren pursuits of darkness. Expose these things for the sham that they are." It's a scandal when people waste their lives on things they must do in darkness where no one will see. So it's like the hidden stuff that we're doing. That's wasting time. Rip the cover off of these frauds and see how attractive they look in the light of Christ. Wake up from your sleep. Climb out of your coffins. Christ will show you the light. So watch your step, use your head, and make the most of every chance you get. These are desperate times. And that's what we're living in right now. We've been given the ability to have more time. I mean, whether or not, you work from home or whatever, I'm sure you have banked some time in your day-to-day schedule that you would have been doing X, Y, and Z, and now you can't. You don't have to commute anymore. You can't go to certain restaurants or certain places or whatever. So how are you using that time? And we're still kind of in the midst of this. If you haven't been using it effectively, you can course correct now and make the most of your time to use it wisely, for the Lord. And Ecclesiastes 3:11 tells us he made every beautiful one. And Colossians 4:5, it tells us to make the most out of every opportunity. And we know that the Bible tells us in Joel 2 that God will restore the time, restore the years that the locust has eaten. He's able to do that because, like we said at the beginning, he can step inside and outside of time. So he can maneuver things, things that should take a certain amount of time, make it go quicker. That's how your years are restored, in that sense. So as we kind of, last point we kind of want to talk about is just moving to a kairos mindset. So we mentioned at the beginning, there's two Greek words for the word time. Chronos, which we have went through, which is, chronologically, everything, whatever. And then kairos, which is time as opportunity. It means opportune time. It's the suitable time. It's the right moment. And we see this word, kairos used, I think, even more often in the New Testament than chronos was. And we see it in John 7:6. In the Amplified Classic, it says, "Whereupon Jesus said to them, my time or opportunity has not yet come, but any time is suitable for you, and your time is ready. Any time is always here." This was when the people were complaining that the disciples were not following the Sabbath and all these types of things. And Jesus was saying they need to make better use of my time, or the time that I'm here right now. It's using time as an opportunity. So when we kind of shift to that mindset, what it's really requiring us to make a mental shift in terms of how we view our time. So instead of just viewing, this is 8:40 or 8:35 p.m. at night, and at 9 o'clock I'm doing this. If someone calls you and they're just in distress, and you had planned at 9 o'clock to pray by yourself and watch this TV show and go to bed, and this person is calling you in need and they want you to pray and talk to them, and it extends into 9:15, that's you making most of your kairos time, because that's an opportune time to minister to that person. And it goes against what you may have planned. It goes against the time that you had scheduled out. but it's the time that God is using to breathe upon. And it's not viewing time as sand just dripping away on the hourglass, but it's taking advantage of opportunities for us to share the gospel, opportunities for us to minister to people, and realizing that not every second has the same worth or value. 1 hour of me watching whatever on TV, I watched 90 Day Fiance mess. 1 hour of me, 1 hour of me watching that is not of the same value as 1 hour of me reading the Bible or praying or encouraging someone in the Lord. That time is much more valuable than that hour that I spent watching that mess. So it's us shifting how we put value on time.
And then also keep it in mind that, and Pastor talks about this a lot now too. It's time with God is not always, reading the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, that's great. You definitely should read the Bible. The word is life. And it's, good to spend that time with God in a traditional sense. But maybe your time with God is you listening to a podcast, right? Some podcast from a pastor or some Christian speaker. Maybe it's you listening to music,
or just sitting outside and looking at creation and nature. Like there's sometimes I just sit. We have this big window in our condo, and I'll just look. And Jason would always make fun of me. He's like, "Why are you sitting in the dark like a vampire?" But sometimes I like to see the sun go down, and then I like to see the different colors in the night sky that's not messed up by lights and whatnot. And I'll just look. We have this huge big tree in front of our place, and I'll just look at the wind blowing the leaves, and I just hear so much and see so much from that. And I in terms of God, like when I run, I'll run to the lake and I'll look at the lake, and I can be centered and at one and at peace with God by looking at the lake, because I know that He created it. Yes, and music
Yes.
as well. Definitely can put you in that space. I know for me during the pandemic, I'm about to release some new music from Kelli Proctor Music, and the main project is called Help Me Welcome the Storm. But these were songs that I ministered to myself with during this time of pandemic to bring me peace, and all of these songs relate to the Lord. And it's doing whatever you like. God created everything around us, and there's a useful purpose for everything, and then there's sometimes a perverted purpose or a purpose that's ungodly. You can choose to use things, in a godly manner, and you can choose to use His creation in a godly manner. Just like we know with the internet, it's useful, but then some people don't use it in a useful, godly manner. But whatever it is that brings you into a closer relationship with the Lord, that's valuable time. That's time well spent. We won't ever waste our time when we're spending with the Lord. And as long as 2 or 3 are gathered in His name and we're talking about Him, He's in our midst. So that's time with the Lord as well. Conversations with other people, believers or not, about God. All of those things we need to take advantage of and really make the most of.
So really what we're trying to summarize is, just be very purposeful with your time. I hate to sometimes, have things skew towards this idea of finality, and this idea that life will end one day, but our lives, our mortal lives on this earth will one day come to an end. And when you put it into perspective, if you're 40 years old, like we are in our 40s, if you're 50 or 60, God willing, you live to be 100. But put it in perspective. That's only 30 more summers, 40 more summers. That's only, so many more rotations around the sun. That's only 30 or 40 more birthdays. When you put it in perspective like that, when you say it out loud and really think about that, I mean, time is precious, and you really need to be purposeful about what you're doing. So if you are not operating in your gift, if you're not doing what you believe God has called you to do it. Don't wait. What are you waiting for? There's no time like the present. So take advantage because you really never know, what can happen. Look at 2020. Who could have predicted that we'd be in a situation like this? It literally is something out of a movie. So you really have to take full advantage. And, again, it's funny like how history repeats itself, but this is a common theme throughout history. And regardless of how things turn out, with this pandemic, if it's here to stay, if it's, going to be gone like in a year, 2 years, whatever, our understanding now, if anything, it should hearken you, should push you closer towards reaching out to getting closer to God. This is really what it's all about. And if anything, God is always, again, you got to understand it from a non-human perspective and see it from God's vantage point. He's never wagging his finger going, shame on you for not doing something. He's sitting there at the edge of your bed, edge of like wherever you are, the edge
He's
of
trying
tomorrow.
to cheer you on, with the angels. Don't be weary in well doing. Keep moving on and take advantage of the time. And really, and for people who are like me, which I said at the top, who are very time oriented, that's not necessarily the best place to be either. You don't want to be just so busying yourself where every hour of your day is busy that you don't have room for God to breathe on. You're not flexible advantage of those moments when someone is in need that you need to devote to a friend or to someone that you don't know. Don't just be plowing through life, with your head down and trying to cram everything within these 24 hours. Sometimes the most valuable thing to do is to put your schedule to the side and spend time with your family or spend time with the Lord. So really understanding, and ask yourself, what is time for? Is it for just doing a whole bunch of stuff? Or, as the word tells us, everything that we do for the Lord will last, so it's changing how we see our schedules, which I think this pandemic has done. But I think, in a greater sense, we have to continually reassess how we're spending our time. And I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So we hope you've enjoyed this time, and it's time to give.
Yes. So, we at Lifeline believe in giving, and as the confession that we read, we don't give under pressure out of fear. This is something that is within our hearts. The act of the tithe is really returning back to God what is already His. But we do that with a cheerful heart. We don't do that under some obligation or some fear that we're going to be cursed. That's a misconception that I believe really hasn't been explained in a lot of churches.
We've been redeemed from the curse of the law.
Exactly. So you give,
out of a cheerful heart.
Yes. And you're not giving to man. You're not giving necessarily to a structure, to a church, to a system. You're giving unto the Lord.
Yes.
Just like we serve unto the Lord. We give back to Him what He's blessed us with. So, there's multiple ways to give. On the screen there, you can see, you can text to give. You can give online. If you have the Lifeline app, you can give using the app. You can also even give by mail. So
take advantage and make the best use of your time and your money.
Yes.
And with that, we will see you all tomorrow evening on Encounter Night. Don't miss it at 7:30. And we love you all. Good night.
Love you guys.
I thought this was shorter than the last.